Hello everyone, welcome to HW News. The fast tracking of coronavirus vaccine launch by ICMR has divided the scientists and experts. The ICMR stands by its August 15 deadline, but many scientists have expressed shock and called the deadline as unrealistic. What I found more surprising was how ICMR responded to it. We will come to that, but let us first welcome Dr. Anant Bhan, who is joining us on the show. He is bioethics and global health researcher and one of the strongest voices against the move of ICMR. So welcome to HW News.
Thank you for having me.
So the ICMR has set a date of August 15 for the vaccine launch. Now I'm saying from a general point of view and from a common man's point of view that a vaccine on August 15 is a positive news maybe. Isn't it better that we have developed the indigenous vaccine, and with ICMR being so confident it is going to be launched by the next month?
Yeah, so I think all of us are very supportive of indigenous science, and we also want Indian vaccine industry as well as Indian vaccine research to prosper. That having been said, vaccine research is also a complex process and it takes time. And based on what we know about vaccine trials and the way they need to be conducted, it looks almost impossible for the trials which we are talking about here for COVAXINE to be completed by 15th August. And unless you've completed your vaccine trials, to have a vaccine in the market or a vaccine for public use is obviously not going to be possible. So I think that is where a lot of the concerns which have been raised are, is that based on what we've seen in the public domain and what is reflected in entities such as the Clinical Trials Registry of India, the information seems to suggest that the development will take much longer. And so it's unfair to make a claim, because that can also cause a misconception, as you're rightly pointing out, among the lay public, that we will have something in hand by the 15th of August. The truth is, vaccine research does take time, and there is a reason for that. And the reason is that we need to do it right to ensure that whichever vaccine we come out with at the end of the process is safe, is efficacious, and the process involved has been done in a quality way.
Correct. Sir, ICMR in its defense wrote a letter in which it said that animal and human trial can run parallel, and the timeline has been set to cut the red tapeism just like it did with the testing kits. So what is your response to that? Is it acceptable, the response of the ICMR?
So ICMR is a co-creator of the vaccine, and it's good that we are seeing our national science bodies contribute to R&D in the vaccine domain, given that we are in the middle of a pandemic and we need a vaccine certainly. But that having been said, there are certain timelines you can compress. There are other timelines which are not possible to be compressed, in the sense that there are certain basic tenets of vaccine research which need to be followed. That being looking at safety issues, looking at immunogenicity issues, and then looking at efficacy issues. Whatever we have in the public domain so far seems to indicate that they are looking at safety and immunogenicity studies, and even those have a time frame which goes much beyond the 15th of August. At least that's what they have publicly registered with the Clinical Trials Registry of India. So if our first couple of phases of human studies will not be over, then there is, how can we even surmise that the efficacy studies, which is where actually you prove whether the vaccine works or not, will be done by that date. With any accelerated timeline, that's just not going to be possible. So yes, you can try to collapse things a little bit, and even WHO has advocated for that, and we should certainly do that where possible. Red tapeism should be cut to whatever extent, but that doesn't mean that you can push institutions to go beyond a certain limit. Committees like the ethics committees of these institutions, which are the trial sites, need adequate time to look at the protocol, to understand the protocol, to raise queries about the protocol, both on the science parts and the ethics parts, and then receive a response on them. So hopefully they will not feel that they are being cornered into having to take a decision too soon, because that might have implications on risk for the participants of these clinical studies, as well as longer term implications in terms of missing out on important components which should be examined during clinical trials, and and we might end up with a vaccine which doesn't satisfy all of those important parameters that we already talked about.
The COVAXINE human trial is starting this month, and the subject recruitment, the ICMR has asked the 12 clinical trial sites to do this by tomorrow onwards. Do you think will the organizations be ready for that, for subject recruitment?
Well, that depends on a lot of factors. How much of work has already been happening at these institutions to prepare them for a clinical study. You need the infrastructure, you need the human resources, you also need obviously the trial vaccine candidate to be already shipped there, stored properly. double checking on if everything is in place, and then starting the process of trial recruitment. A lot of because these are typically going to be healthy volunteers who need to be recruited into these studies. It will also require these kinds of individuals to be invited to come over to these trial sites, many of which are hospitals. Understandably, there are concerns about visiting health centers right now, especially if you are healthy, because people are concerned about potentially contracting COVID-19. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge getting them in. Once you get them in, then you have to explain what you plan.
So, a lot of people are making this point that by hurrying for vaccine launch, is ICMR putting lives of people involved in human trials at risk?
Well, I mean, ICMR has a long history of doing research in this country, including vaccine trials. I would think that they would certainly not do that. This letter is probably a bit of an aberration that they came out with it. I think people within ICMR, the experts involved, as well as the company involved, BBIL, both of them know that you need to do things right. And on top of that, you have regulatory oversight, which is the Drug Controllers General Office, General of India, the CDSCO, which will also have to ensure that these trials have to be done in the right way. And so, yes, if you cut corners, if you don't take the necessary measures, don't follow the necessary protocols, you could potentially put people at risk. But hopefully, our scientists will be wise enough to not do that, because the repercussions of that will be much more dire. It could hurt the credibility of Indian vaccine research, of Indian science in general, and push back the research field by quite a while.
Correct. I'm coming to the ICMR letter, sir. The two letters that ICMR had written. In the first letter, it had asked the clinical trial sites to fast track the approvals, and it said that non-compliance of it will be taken very seriously. In the second letter that it wrote in its defense, it said that the best of India's medical professionals and research scientists should not be second-guessed for their professionalism. So is ICMR taking very stern approach? I mean, this tone is very strong.
Yeah, it is a bit surprising, because I think, while certainly you should try to work with clinical trial sites to ensure that they get up and running as fast as possible, and you support through that process, you cannot push them into a corner and make demands of going through the requisite approvals and getting started on the clinical trials. You have to give them enough time and support them through that process. So I think the tone is a bit surprising, because, listen, this is a partnership. It's also science, and science has to be done in the right way, and it does take time. So while, a sense of urgency is good, it should not be at the cost of quality. And no one is trying to second guess Indian scientists. As I said earlier, all of us are very supportive of that, but we are also concerned about the way the science is being conducted, or is being planned to be conducted. And we hope that better sense will prevail, and we will do it in a way that we are all confident of the way these vaccine trials are happening. And so the product, as and when we have it, hopefully which works, is something that there is a fair level of confidence in, by the regulator, by the lay public, by the scientist community. And remember, because this is also going to be a vaccine for which there will not just be interest in India, but in other countries as well. So in the same way, we would expect certain scientific protocols to have been followed if we were to import a vaccine from any other country. I'm sure those countries would require us to do the same, so that an Indian vaccine also ticks all the required boxes in how vaccine development should happen.
Correct. So my last question, not that the ICMR does not have its ethics committee, but there is no scientist from the ICMR, even from the ethics committee, who has spoken against this.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would have been nice if the ICMR had clarified in their follow-up press release. It was good that they reinforced the fact that they are committed to science, and that they're committed to doing the vaccine trial the right way, but they didn't in many ways respond to the substantive issues raised about the earlier letter. So again, as I said, the ICMR has some really good scientists. We hope that they and the ICMR leadership will take into account some of the feedback about this letter, and ensure that the science that they are involved in is done in a proper manner. They are co-creators of the vaccine. They have an interest in the vaccine as well, and they need to also ensure that the vaccine that we are talking about is developed in a way that we should be all proud of that process.
Well, just one more question, sir. The ICMR has been tasked with managing the COVID-19 pandemic in India. How has it fared so far, in your view?
So I think ICMR is one of the key components of the response. It's been a focal agency, and I think they have expertise through their member institutions such as the National Institute of Virology, the National Institute of Epidemiology, and also the folks involved at headquarters in Delhi. And I think they've been trying their best to try to respond. There have been some concerns raised. The vaccine trial controversy is one example. The choices about going ahead with hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic is another example. Maybe not being too proactive on the testing part earlier is another example where people have raised concerns. But they are also fighting, as a lead organization in this response, and one does recognize that there are pressures, and there is a sense of urgency they also have. So with all those limitations, I think they've tried their best. Obviously we hope that they can do better, and they can get supported through that. But again, having said that, it's important for them also, as being our premier biomedical research agency in the country, that they take leadership in the way science is conducted, in the way we are responding to COVID-19, and in the way we do our vaccine trials, in such a way that not only are they setting the standards, but they are also following those standards.
Correct, definitely. Well, criticism is not a crime and science thrives on questioning. We hope that ICMR takes note of this criticism and acts on it. Well, thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.